Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Monday Mindsets. We'll be talking about the focus from a lot of financial YouTubers and TikTokers on how you have to have investments and you have to be prepared for retirement, and you need to be able to have at least $1 million in retirement, which in the UK is around about 750 800,000 pounds at the current exchange. But a lot of the commentators are American, so they talk in terms of dollars. Probably if there were UK ones, they'd be saying you had to have £1 million in retirement. Because people like big numbers. They like round numbers. They like whole numbers. A million sounds good until you realise that based on the current rates of inflation and the trends around inflation, to have the buying power of £1 million in 30 years' time, for example, you would actually need to have closer to 3 million by the time you retired. Because joy of inflation is that it devalues the currency. And in the UK particularly, our currency has been horribly devalued, more or less since the 1970s. It's actually quite scary. Go on a site that compares historic currency values, and it's actually quite terrifying just how much of our spending power has actually been lost over time, and will be lost because inflation trends are not going to change. They're probably actually going to become worse because even right now, the economy is not especially stable. It's being very volatile. We're seeing repeated recessions happening within very short time spans. We are repeatedly swinging very, very close to recession, even if we don't actually enter recession by official standards. We swing very, very close to it in very regular frequencies, which is not normal. And so, the reality is that a lot of people are not going to have £1 million or $1 million in retirement. The reality is that even if they did, that's not going to have the same spending power that £1 million or $1 million has now. We're facing a reality where social security and the welfare state is the focus of governments is to dismantle those provisions, which there's an issue there around we live in a democracy, and therefore something as big as we don't feel that we, the government, should be providing for you in your old age, or when disability means you are no longer able to work. And that includes providing for you with your own money that you've given to us for that purpose via taxation and via, in the UK, national insurance. Those decisions shouldn't be being made unilaterally. They shouldn't be simply a government vote. They should be referendums in a democracy, because that's a huge impact. Because it's not just a decision you've made, it's something that is going to impact how people in their 20s and 30s and 40s now view, adjust and run their working lives. And you can't just go, well, that's just a decision that you've elected us to make. No, it isn't. Because it's going to change people's approach. It's going to change what people do with their lives. And especially with more and more people finding themselves in not great health and dealing with disabilities at younger and younger ages, And the government would like to claim that that's because of a lack of resilience, and it's TikTok culture convincing everybody that they have this and that and the other. Or it's chronic air pollution. It's chronic ground pollution, which pollutes food sources. It's chronic water pollution. It's actually the impact of long hours sitting at computer screens and other screens. It's kind of wild that we're told, oh gosh, don't let your children play computer games for more than 2 to 3 hours at a time because it's really damaging to them. But you can spend 8 to 10 hours in an office sitting staring at a computer screen, and that's fine. That doesn't have the same impact at all. We're losing safe outdoor spaces, which are where people exercise. We're being forced into smaller and smaller housing, which means people don't have the space to exercise at home. We are losing the exercise of normal daily life because people don't have time to walk to the shops, walk around the shops, walk back with their shopping. They don't want to be on their hands and knees sweeping their carpet and scrubbing their door lintels. They don't want to haul wet laundry out to a washing line. In the UK, good luck with doing that for about 9 months of the year because it just rains constantly, and even if it doesn't rain, it's so damply cold that nothing gets dry. The one thing I like about summer, I hate summer as a season. I love it for the free laundry drying. Free laundry drying is fantastic, but again, we've got more and more people living for longer and longer times in rented rooms in other people's houses. They don't necessarily have somewhere that they can dry clothes outside. People are living in high-rise flats. They don't necessarily have somewhere they can dry laundry outside. And so we're losing that normal exercise that, our parents and grandparents would have done as part of their everyday life. You look around, growing up in the 90s, as I did most of my growing up, it was very, very unusual to see families with 2 cars. Where they did, you had 2 high earners who worked in completely opposite directions at well-paying jobs. Now it's, of course, as soon as your child passes their driving test at 17, 18, they need their own car. When I was growing up, you drove your parents' car if they weren't using it. And if they were using it, tough luck, that was you taking the bus. People are driving distances that they could easily walk, which is, I'm medically banned from driving because I'm blind, which frustrates me in a lot of ways, but because that's been part of my life for over 20 years, it just bewilders me that, where I live, I'm 10 minutes away from the shops, 10 minutes walk. People from my street will drive to those shops that are 10 minutes away. And even if I had a car, that wouldn't make any kind of sense to me. That's, unless of course you're going and buying like items of furniture or heavy bags of pet food or something. I can understand that. But in general, even if I had a car, unless I was buying those heavy, bulky things, I'd still walk to the shops. And, we don't have that anymore because, you're a bit of a loser if you don't have a car. Oh my God, why would you walk somewhere? And because so few people are walking, there's a perception that walking is unsafe. And absolutely, in some areas and for certain kinds of people, particularly women, it is. And that's definitely something that needs to be addressed through education first and through actual enforcement of people should not be afraid to go about their lawful business. And that means that, you getting drunk and being an idiot shouldn't be permissible if it makes other people feel they're not safe to just be walking down a street. But anyway, back to the main purpose of this video, which is to discuss what do you do in the light of all of these changes that maybe shouldn't be being made, but are being made without engagement, without consent in many cases, and they're going to have huge impacts when a lot of people are just in a situation where they can't just go and make more money. A lot of jobs in the UK actually don't allow you to have a second job. So if that job doesn't pay you enough, too bad. You either have to do another job and hope your employer never finds out, your first employer never finds out, or you're just stuck with not making a lot of money. In many cases, even doing another job doesn't actually give you enough income to have investments. It doesn't give you enough income to manage property, to afford to manage property, because that's expensive. The process of actually getting approved to purchase property is extensive. There's a lot of requirements that need to be in place beforehand, and okay, you've saved up a deposit, and then in the time you were saving that deposit up, property prices have gone up, because that's what they do. And now the mortgage won't cover the gap between the deposit you have and the property you want to buy. And if you save up for longer, property prices will keep going up again. And you'll never actually get into that position. And if we are going to see the dismantling of a welfare state, then what needs to happen is we need to have an understanding from the government that they need to believe people when people say these are the jobs that I can age through. So, for example, and there needs to be a route for that embedded in jobs. So warehousing, retail, customer service, food service, all of those jobs need to have progression to management embedded into them. And it needs to be accessible for everyone. Because you could come in as a manager with purely executive oversight in your 60s and 70s, even into your 80s. You can't be doing that frontline stuff in those eras. And equally, we do need to go back. We need to step it back to a manager has executive oversight. They are not someone who steps in and fills the gap. They make sure the gap isn't there in the first place by recruiting enough people, by actually engaging with people around the flexibility they have, by being aware of trends for when customers are in, when things are most busy and least busy, by having contingencies. It's very unsustainable to have the view that, the manager should be able to do the job. No, they should have done it at one time and therefore know what needs to be done. They shouldn't be the one doing it, because that allows for the progression through sustainability through every part of aging. And you should be spending less time at work potentially as you age. But in order for that to happen, you need to be paid more because you're in a more strategic position, because of the experience you've acquired through being in that industry for as long as you have, through being actually alive and a working person for as long as you have. And that's going to cause some unfairness. It's going to mean, as it already does, in some cases, that people are being paid more just because they've been alive longer. And that doesn't feel fair, but it's right. because you're compensating those people for their experience and their commitment. And you know what? What that also does, that payment by your age and the experience you've had in the sector, actually encourages people to take better care of themselves, so that they will be alive longer, so that they will be able to commit to a sector longer. And by people taking better care of themselves, and I'm talking about able-bodied people primarily, but there are ways that as disabled people we can take care of ourselves. Those will be more limited than the means that are available to able-bodied people, but they do exist. As people take better care of themselves, costs to the NHS decrease, because people aren't getting sick from completely preventable lifestyle conditions. Not every disability is a lifestyle condition. I have 4 separate diagnosed sight loss conditions. My lifestyle is not related to any of them, except that 1 or 2 of them may be exacerbated by screen use, which is why I'm currently trying to find jobs that I can otherwise do that get me away from using screens, but that's proving very, very challenging. And again, it's where the actual welfare state should be stepping in. It's what the reform should be, is that someone comes in and goes, I'm aware that this kind of work is going to exacerbate my disability. I've identified that XYZ kinds of work would not exacerbate my disability, or would exacerbate it to a lesser degree. However, I don't have experience in those jobs. Can you help me get on a path to where I can confidently go to those jobs, and I can have more likelihood of getting those jobs, so that I can be employed sustainably for the rest of my life? And yeah, a lot of people I know already think, oh God, I don't want to be working when I'm 80. I want my life back. But the reality is that most of us are not going to have good health in older age. We're not going to have a life. And that's why we need to be creating a system where people can earn a viable living at older ages, working fewer hours, because that respects that bodies and brains slow down as a natural part of aging. Yes, we can do things to make them slow down more slowly. We can do things to keep them running smoothly for longer. But the inevitability of aging is that we will slow down. Our bodies and brains will slow down, because that's the process of dying. And we're all in the process of dying, depressing as it seems. People will go, oh, well, that's why I'm not worried about a job, because I could die tomorrow. Personally, I'd rather have security of income and less aggravation from the government while I'm in the process of dying. I'd rather die tomorrow without having had to have a stressful phone call with the Department for Work and Pensions the day before. And it's not going to be an easy path, especially with the mindsets that the current government has, and the mindsets that the people who enter government have. Especially in the UK, we've been doing things this way more or less since forever, more or less since we left the feudal era. And in the UK, we really don't like change. We go, well, but it's not that bad. And if people could just be more adaptable. And we weasel around and we find every single reason to never change until we hit crisis point. And I've worked in crisis management and crisis change. And honestly, it's always easier to change before you need to. Thank you for listening to today's video, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on how work can be a sustainable lifelong endeavour. Thank you.